Good afternoon and welcome back to Jeff and the Rabbi. Topic today, something a lot of people probably didn't know about. We were just discussing, about a week ago, last week, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, brought up in an interview the fact that when the Mufti of Jerusalem, who we can talk about a little bit later, he's the guy behind me in the cute hat, when the Mufti of Jerusalem went to Germany in 1941 to talk with Hitler. And according to Netanyahu, in that discussion, the Mufti was the first to bring up, let's actually murder the Jews. He was the first to bring up the killing of the Jews. Now, by the picture you behind us, you can see he clearly went there. We know he went there.
Right.
But this statement really...
And they clearly seem to be getting along quite famously. They're happy with each other.
They're happy.
Yeah.
But this statement by Netanyahu really angered everybody in the West, and it caused a big firestorm here.
Right.
Now, I know you're probably going to have a good Torah explanation on this because that's kind of your thing. You do that a lot. You're pretty good with the Torah. I'm going to give a simple answer because I'm a simple guy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to simply tell why this riled everybody up. I mean, clearly we see the Mufti, and just for a quick explanation, the Mufti of Jerusalem was this guy back in the first part of the last century, who was he pretty much controlled the Arabs in Jerusalem. I don't think he lived there. But his job was every time, he collected all the rents, so the poor starving Arabs, every time things would get bad enough, he had to go blame somebody. So he usually blamed the Jews, because they're usually the easy people to blame. And he would cause boycotts and riots and a couple massacres here and there to kill the Jews. So obviously he had something in common with Hitler. And during World War II, everybody around the world had to make a decision who they're going to support. And the Mufti, like most all of the Arab leaders, chose the side of the Germans instead of the British. They clearly were on the German side. The Jews obviously were on the British side. And so the Mufti, he went to talk to Hitler about what to do about the Jews. So I think one of the things that got everybody so riled up here is because the Nazis, we've done a great job with our Western history lately. We've put the Nazis in this box. Evil, horrible Nazis that just rose up out of the ground. Hitler probably came from hell. He was like the devil. Rose up out of the ground to kill the Jews. They weren't the good European people. We are now in our history we teach about these horrible, evil Nazis.
Right.
It makes it convenient. Europe isn't really to blame. America isn't really to blame. It was these evil, horrible Nazis.
Somehow his crazy evil just took over.
By itself, somehow. Forget
Took
about
over.
that they were elected. We don't want to talk about that.
Took over.
They came out, they killed everybody. End of the war. Hitler's dead. Göring's dead. Himmler, Heydrich, they're all dead. It's all over. We're
evil
clean.
is gone.
Now we go back into a clean world where everybody loves the Jews.
Right.
And I think what happens, the first thing that happens is when we compare a man like the Mufti, well, he wanted the Jews dead too, clearly. That kind of changes that thing, considering now that the whole world is, especially the left, is getting sympathetic to Islam, and the Jews are still, people still want to kill them. I think the second part of it is, especially in the last couple years, where in America, where the current administration is clearly pro-Islam and clearly anti-Israel, you start bringing up these kind of pictures in your mind. You see this picture behind us, and the guy in the hat back there, he looks very similar, maybe like the mullahs of today and things like that. And we think that right now, in the last couple of years, the Muslim Brotherhood has been the group that's gone to the White House more than anybody else there to go talk to Obama. They have the same opinions as the Mufti behind us. The same one, we got to kill the Jews. John Kerry has sat down, if not directly, but with the representatives of the mullahs of Iran, who look just like this guy here, who want the exact same thing. Hitler's gone, the Nazis are gone, but they still want to kill the Jews. And the worst part of it is that we're now giving them the ability to do it. In this Iran deal that just happened, for example, we're now going to give the guys that look just like that and sound just like that $150 billion. And the Iranians make it very clear, we're going to give that money to Hezbollah, we're going to give that money to Hamas, and they want to kill the Jews. We're going to be guaranteed a nuclear bomb by Obama. We're going to be guaranteed a nuclear bomb that we say we will not take off the table. We definitely will kill every Jew in Israel. Destruction of Israel is our goal, and we won't change it. And that's still on the table. And so it makes it kind of difficult and kind of awkward for the people of the left, like the administration in America, to say, what's going on here? This guy, the Mufti, he's still around. His descendants still want to kill the Jews, and we're now giving them the equipment and the ability and the power to do it, and it's pretty darn awkward. How do you talk yourself out of this situation now?
You know what really bothers me?
What's that?
That the New York Times editorial said that you're wrong. I mean, I read it in the New York Times editorial. You're clearly wrong.
I take it back then.
I mean, you couldn't be right.
If that right-wing rag says that I'm wrong, I must be wrong.
The New York, after Netanyahu spoke, so, of course, the New York Times was visibly upset.
But why?
Right,
why are they so visibly upset?
The New York Times was very upset. So they said, what's the real problem with Netanyahu? What was so bad about what he said? And remember, he said, like Jeff just said, that the Mufti met with Hitler, and Hitler wasn't planning to kill the Jews, according to the way Netanyahu tells the story, until the Mufti told them to just kill them. Now, that doesn't mean, and everyone say, what do you mean Hitler wasn't killing the Jews? He was already killing Jews and all that. What he meant, and of course I didn't speak to him about it, and I don't have to defend Netanyahu, and he'll defend himself or whatever, but I think what he meant was that, of course Hitler wanted to get rid of the Jews, just Hitler hadn't yet settled on this mass extermination plan.
He had not,
he was killing people all over the place, and he was trying to figure out, because he realized at this point that, like, to killing them one by one and this whole problem is just too much. It's not going to work. So he was trying to figure out what to do. And at that point, at least this is what Netanyahu is contending, he was still examining other possibilities, including expelling all the Jews.
Right.
The Mufti came along and he said, don't expel them, because if you do, they're going to come over here. They're going to come over to my Jerusalem, right? They're going to come over to my end of the world, and we don't want them over there. And the Mufti was very upset because he already saw what was happening, because Jews were trickling over to Israel. Right. At this point, by 1940, they had been trickling over to Israel for about 60 years. And that was getting pretty serious. There was more and more of them. So he didn't like that idea, and he thought, this is going to be the worst.
He was still selling them plots of lands, but still making his money there.
But But he saw what was coming. Right. There are going to be more and more of them. He didn't want them there. So then he told Hitler, just get rid of them all. You have to exterminate them right here. And at that point, I don't know if that's when Hitler discovered the idea, or he changed his mind, or whatever, or maybe that helped him decide. Maybe that was one of the options on the table, but it certainly contributed to his decision at the Wannsee conference, where they decided, which was held right after that meeting.
Now, Heydrich would be a little upset because he thought he came up with it, but it was right, the Wannsee Protocol conference, it was right after that. So,
right.
But yeah.
And at that point, they did come to the conclusion that the rest of the world really wasn't going to take these people. And I think the Mufti, it could very well be that the Mufti helped contribute to that. So no one's trying to, give Hitler a pass. No one's trying to say that Hitler didn't want to hurt Jews until the Mufti came along. No, what they're really saying is that these two people were kindred souls, and that they found each other, and enter the New York Times. So why is the New York Times totally bent out of shape over this? So the New York Times says, you know what's really wrong? This is in the editorial that appeared on Friday after Netanyahu spoke. It made these comments about the Mufti being the one that fed the idea to Hitler. So the New York Times says that the real problem with Netanyahu is that he makes it seem as though this is some ancient hatred, and it's not dependent on contemporary issues of freedom, self-expression, and oppression that's going on now. In other words, he's casting it as though this is like an age-old hatred, when we all know, and that can't be, because it's got to be dependent on oppression, on the fact that the Israelis are oppressing the Arabs. Now, it has to be, I would say, for a couple of reasons. First of all, my comment, because if it wasn't, then the Arabs might be at fault, and the Jews wouldn't be at fault. Right. So and then we can't do that. But more likely what they would tell you is, what the New York Times would tell you is, because that would mean that there's such a thing as age-old hatreds, and that peoples hate each other and all that. And that can't be. Everyone is really good. And the only time that people act nasty, and I think that even the New York Times would agree that the Arabs are acting nasty right now, but the only time they're acting nasty, there must be that they were forced into it by someone oppressing them. And who else could be oppressing them but the Israelis? Therefore, the Israelis are responsible, because it couldn't be that the Arabs are just bad people, and it couldn't be that they have any age-old hatreds, because we don't believe in age-old hatreds, because really we're all just the same, and we all could really love each other if we would just drop them. So, and here we go. And you know what? I agree with the New York Times to a certain extent. And I agree with them that, yes, the way Netanyahu framed it,
clearly,
it does give that impression, and that is what he was trying to say. And I understand why the New York Times is upset about that, because, yes, that is what he's trying to say, you know?
But are they upset because just typical liberalism, we can't blame the Arabs, it has to be the Jews' fault, or is it a deeper thing as, hey, we know deep down this anti-Semitism has been there, it's never going to leave, it's always there, but now we can't blame Nazism, and look at the Arabs, as you said, they're kindred spirits. They're still preaching the same thing. Hitler's dead and gone. They're still preaching the same thing.
So this is what Netanyahu was trying to say. When this meeting took place, the Jews were not oppressing the Arabs.
Right.
The Jews didn't have a country. They didn't have an army. They didn't have numerical superiority, financial superiority, nothing. At the time, if anyone was getting oppressed in Israel, it was Jews who had been massacred by the Mufti in 1929, right? Mufti incited by him absolutely and totally, and other subsequent massacres. If anything, the Arabs were massacring Jews, and at that point there was no reason to say that it was because Jews were oppressing Arabs or Muslims, unless you could say that they were thinking, well, you know, if this keeps up, then they will become numerically superior. They will establish a state. They'll become a superpower. They will become, and you know, if they were thinking of all of that, like, you know, more power to them. And to tell you the truth, I think they were thinking like that. But then again, I'm one of those age-old hatred type of people.
Right.
See, when you have age-old hatreds, then you do think like that.
Right.
And actually, that's kind of what happened. So, you know, I think that the Mufti and me, like, we are kind of seeing it the same way. He was right. He was right, because he knew if he didn't try to stop them, they're going to keep coming, and they're going to take over, and they're going to make a country, and they're going to want to run it their way. Yeah, he was right.
Wow. So, okay, so obviously, but the point is, what does this say about policy today, the New York Times, administration? I mean, because the thing is, I mean, we're happy to go ahead and say that the reason, for example, that some people were killed, some random people were killed in a kosher market in France on the hours before Shabbos was just because it was random act of violence. Are you saying that it's not random act of violence?
No.
There's hatred, and the reason that they went into that kosher market was actually to kill Jews?
Well, here comes the Torah.
Oh, gosh.
The Torah shows up only 15 minutes into our show, and the Torah makes an appearance.
Pretty good.
Okay. So here's the deal. Especially during these weeks of the Torah portions that we are reading. Okay? So we did read last week the Torah reading of this past Sabbath morning. We read about the birth of Ishmael. We actually read about the week before that about Ishmael. We read about the birth of Isaac. We read about the fact that there was a lot of tension there. We read about the fact that Ishmael got booted out. Okay? Then we're going to read about the birth of Esau coming up in another week. And we're going to read that there's this tension between Esau and his twin brother Jacob. Mm-hmm. And we are going to read there that there is a tremendous amount of tension, and that the two of them literally came out of the womb as enemies. They are at odds with each other. And the famous oft-quoted teaching that was quoted by the great commentator Rashi, one of the sages of the Talmud says that it is known that Esau hates Jacob. Now, this is because if you read the story, you'll find that the two brothers are essentially pitted against each other for control of the world. There's an Esau vision of the way the world's supposed to be. Right. There's a Jacobian vision of how the world's supposed to be. And each one realizes if the other one's vision is successful, then I'm out of here. There's no room for Esau in a Jacob world, and there's no room for Jacob in Esau world. That sounds like age-old hatreds. There's no oppression involved. There's nothing involved. It's not like someone's taken someone else's piece of land. Those two are at odds with each other because they represent different ideals for mankind. This is an idea that the New York Times and all those that would read it, I believe, the type of people that would be in line with that philosophy, cannot countenance. There can't be such a thing. They wouldn't just.
But you're not saying that Esau represents the Arabs.
No.
Is
Oh, where do the Arabs show up in
Well,
this?
you got Ishmael here
Okay,
too,
so we got
right?
the two people, as has been mentioned. So Esau is the guy without the hat. Okay,
Right.
in the picture,
He's the
the guy without the hat, right, and a little funny mustache.
Mustache, right.
That's the guy, that's the Esau guy. What you have here, in biblical terminology, is a meeting between Esau and Ishmael. Ishmael is the first son of Abraham, older brother of Isaac. A lot of tension between them. Lots and lots of tension between them. So it's a really interesting episode. You can read about it. It's really just a sentence or two in the book of Genesis, chapter 28. I believe it's around pasuk verse 5 or so, somewhere right around there. Okay, chapter 28 in the early verses. So what has just happened in the story? There's the famous episode in the Torah about the blessings. Isaac is going to bless one of his sons. He is intending to bless Esau. Jacob gets in there, tricks him into thinking that he's Esau, and he blesses Jacob instead. Then he realizes what's going on. He ratifies the blessing to Jacob. Esau comes home. Esau realizes, oh no, what happened? My brother just, bamboozled me, and he managed to steal away the blessings from me and all that. Jacob hightails it out of town because he knows Esau's really mad at him. Then it says a really interesting thing. And why does Jacob leave town? Ostensibly, see, Rebekah knows, the mother, knows that Esau wants to kill Jacob. She goes to Isaac, who does not know that Esau wants to kill Jacob, and she says, Jacob really needs to get married. You should tell him that he should go back home to where I came from and find a wife just like you sent back home to get me. So that's where you should go to, because we don't want to marry amongst all these local Canaanite women. They're from accursed people, and we don't marry into them. Okay, so Isaac says, good idea, calls in Jacob, says, go get married. And Jacob hightails it out of there, really to listen to his father, but really to get away from Esau, wants to kill him. Esau sees that Jacob doesn't like the Canaanite women. He doesn't like Canaanite women.
Isaac doesn't.
That Isaac does not like Canaanite women. He sees that his father, Isaac, does not like Canaanite women. That's why he sent Jacob back home. Now, Esau happens to be married to Canaanite women, like a whole boatload of them at the time, right? So Esau decides, well, I got to start acting like a nice guy and get in my father's good graces. So he says, I'm going to get me a new wife.
Right.
But where am I going to go? Who am I going to marry? So he says, well, I'll marry Ishmael, a daughter of Ishmael.
He wasn't thinking too smart there.
And why Ishmael? Because it's from the same family, not from the Canaanite family, from the same family. Now, of course, that's kind of a bad move, because why would he think that Isaac would be impressed with him by marrying a daughter of Ishmael? Isaac and Ishmael, they've had their problems,
Right.
Okay, maybe at this point, maybe Ishmael had repented, maybe they had reconciled, maybe perhaps, I don't know. But anyway, the verse then says that Esau saw that it was not good in his father's eyes that he had married the Canaanite women. So he went to Ishmael and he married his daughter, married a daughter of Ishmael. Okay? And in doing that, he unified the Ishmael strain and the Esau strain. And he brought the two of them together, the two energies, the two forces, the force of Ishmael and the force of Esau. And actually, it's much more potent, the force of Ishmael against the force of Esau. Because in the blessings that Isaac gave to Jacob, he said, and then later on said to Esau, he said, the two of you are like a teeter-totter.
Right.
When one goes up, the other's down. Okay? So what happened was, Esau was up, Hitler. Jacob was down, 6 million were killed. But then it switched, right? And then it switched, it went down. So when they realize, when the good fortunes of the Jewish people are rebounding, along comes Ishmael, and Ishmael says, well, I'm not bound by any of that stuff. I'm not bound by any of that. Matter of fact, I was blessed by my father that, on my hands and everything, I'm everywhere. So it's a potent mixture. When you mix together Esau and Ishmael, it's more powerful than Esau itself.
This is like the marriage right here is what's happening behind us. Yeah.
Right. Now, I don't want to get too much into reading the story and saying this is what happened and that's what happened. I don't know. All I know is the idea is that those two had their reasons for hating the Jews. Those two find in each other kindred spirits, and I think that's all Netanyahu was trying to say, and that it did not have roots in the fact that the Jews were oppressing anyone, just like Esau and Ishmael, Jacob, Isaac, nobody was oppressing Esau and Ishmael at the time. They were the underdogs. They had to run away, Jacob and Isaac, his father. They had a tough time with Ishmael and Esau. So no one was being oppressed. He said, these are age-old hatreds, and these people really hate us, and therefore you, the West, trying to come in here and say, well, we could only solve this if you would stop doing this or if you would start doing that. The answer to that is no way, poppycock. It's not going to happen because there are age-old hatreds here, and that's what he was pointing out. Now, how do we read the Torah and define exactly what's happening? That's way too fine-tuned for me. But we do know that we have these different forces, and we do know that now, with the return of Israel, the nation, to the land, this brings all of this into focus, and that's why it's blowing up all over again.
So, for me to interpret what you're saying in my non-politically correct way that I sometimes do, you could be implying that John Kerry, Esau, or Barack Obama, Esau, coupling with the mullahs of Iran, Ishmael, is just the same old, age-old situation that's happened before going against Jacob of today. So this is to be expected, and so that would probably mean that John Kerry or Barack Obama are probably playing the villain in this story. I'm not
going to put any names on anyone. I'm not putting any names or identifying anyone, but I would say as follows, that those people that, although they might come from an entirely different culture and an entirely different place, those people that unify or find common cause with the Ishmaelites against the Jews, that is those two different strains. I mean, I think many people are really neutral. There are many non-Jews who are very supportive of Israel, and there are many non-Jews that are totally neutral on the issue. But there are some who are not at all Arabic Ishmaelite descendants, but yet identify with that cause. And when you see that happening, you find these two very old hatreds, the Western anti-Semitism versus the Arab anti-Semitism, that generally for centuries functioned in their own spheres, now seem to be coming together and being united. And what did it take to unite them? See, once upon a time, there used to be Jews in Europe. And then there used to be Jews in Arab countries. Well, now there are hardly any Jews in Arab countries. Right. And there are not so many Jews in Europe anymore either, in the West. Right. But where you do have Jews is in a new place, in Israel. And that seems to be uniting those two streams. And people that find common cause between those two parties are really that photo, and that's what Netanyahu was saying.
So today people could be playing their roles in this part, not realizing it, not understanding it, but they could be... Kids that are going on the college campuses could be playing their roles. The kids, the adults in politics in the U.S. government can be playing their roles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Who the people that we need to get clued into this is the Jews themselves. Because the Jews themselves, like, for example, he said on college campuses, these poor Jewish kids get out on campus and they really don't understand, what's all this hatred all about? Why are you hating me? And they can't understand it. So they presume it must be because Israeli oppression. Yep. And then they hate Israel. Even Jewish kids hate Israel because why is Israel oppressing them? And what they don't realize is that this way predates any of that. These are like deep-seated things that go way back. And really, I think that's all Netanyahu was trying to say was that long before there was ever any occupied territory, long before there was a state of Israel, long before Israelis had guns, long before there were Israelis, there was the Mufti. And who did the Mufti find common cause with? Hitler.
True. I mean, it's again, the way you can tell when you have success in something is when you have the response that he had. This minor statement that should be so minor, I mean, it blew up pretty big, and I think it touched a nerve there. And I think it touched a few nerves.
Right.
Maybe sometimes the West, they're covering up their Esau background there, and when you bring it out, it's a raw nerve.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it's kind of shocking.
Yeah. Well, they really don't want to believe in background altogether.
Right. They
just don't want to. They want to deny that there is background. There's no background. It's all what you see right now. What you see. It's all because of oppression and economic disadvantage and lack of self-determination and no statehood and all that type of stuff, because they cannot countenance the fact that there could be some other bigger cause. If there is, how would they ever deal with that?
I mean, it'd be interesting if even Jews knew, well, the Palestinians, if that's what they call them, have been offered statehood 3 or 4 times. They've not accepted it because in that granting of statehood, there has to be Israel next door with Jews.
Right.
So maybe if the Jews today understood that the Palestinians can have statehood anytime they want to have
it's like a guy explained to me, if they make 2 states, so one state will be for the Arabs, and one state will be for the Arabs and the Jews. Then they're going to have to make 2 states. One state for the Arabs, and one state for the Arabs and the Jews. Then they're going to have to make...
So you have to divide down pretty interesting. The only thing is, and I don't want to push you now, I don't want to put you on the spot, since you've read the Torah, how does it all work out in the end?
Yeah, you know what?
You know the answer to that. If you know
I have it all. I have it all clear, but it's still kind of fuzzy. It's still kind of fuzzy, but ultimately, in the end, the good guys win. But it actually probably is going to get nastier before it's going to get better. That's the problem. And in the end, ultimately, Israel finds its way back.
All right. Well, he just spoiled that for you, but yeah. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
All right, it was interesting, and again, I wish people would listen to the show like this, because when you hear it like that, it is pretty clear, and it's hard to argue this because it's been going on for century after century, so it's kind of hard to argue this story.
Yeah.
Argue your position. All right, well, maybe next week, I'll do something else crazy like that, and we'll be talking about something else.
Or by next week, we'll have it all wrapped up. We'll be broadcasting live from Jerusalem.
That'll be pretty good. See you then.